I don't really like to do it.
Okay. I'll get you a bill at OCS. Yeah. 13 weeks of yelling.
Yeah.
Maybe get that voice adjusted a little bit.
Yep.
Check. Section here on infantry. Infantry must move in order to close with the enemy. It must shoot in order to move. Cover and move. I didn't make this stuff up, man. It's so interesting when people, say, oh, I don't know about that. It's like, no, cover and move is a real thing. It's undeniable.
Yeah.
Undeniable. When physical targets are not visible, the fire of all infantry weapons must search the area probably occupied by the enemy. I remember when I learned that for the first time. I think it might have been Roger Hayden that was like, no, shoot where you think the enemy would be. I was like, oh. Because if you think where they could be, I mean, when you're getting fired at from a certain area, you look to that area, you can't tell exactly where the enemy is, so you shoot in the 5 most likely places that you see. And everyone else in your platoon or task unit is doing the same thing. You're going to be shooting at the bad guys, like somewhere. It reduces, and when you're doing that, it reduces the accuracy of his fire and increases our confidence. Shoot short. This is another thing we learned all the time. Ricochets make nastier sounds and wounds. Do you understand that? So when you're shooting at a bad guy, shoot low.
Yeah. Someone was saying that. I think it was Roger Hayden.
It's probably Roger Hayden.
Yeah.
Walking it in with a machine gun. It's just kicking. The ricochets are flying. What ricochets, that means the bullet's tumbling when it hits you. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, and if you don't, or if you shoot high, it doesn't hit anything at all.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So shoot short. Ricochets make nastier sounds and wounds. To halt under fire is folly. To halt under fire and not fire back is suicide. Move forward out of fire. Officers must set the example. Skip a few sections here. Few men are killed by the bayonet. Many are scared of it. Bayonets should be fixed when the firefight starts. Bayonets must be sharpened by the individual soldier. The German hates the bayonet and is inferior to our men with it. Our men should know this. That is psychological warfare. Like what he's actually doing, sure, bayonets are psycho, but what he's actually saying there, he's saying that, you have to sharpen your own bayonet. Think about the psychological beauty of that scenario.
Yep. Yeah.
And then you think the German hates. Does Patton know the German individual soldier hates? He doesn't know that. But you know what? I'm going to tell my freaking entire Third Army that the German hates the bayonet. They're scared of it.
It makes sense.
And we're better at it than they are. And even starts this whole thing. A few people are even killed with the bayonet, but it doesn't matter. Yeah. They're scared of it, sharpen it. We're better than them with the bayonet.
It makes sense. Like if you see, I don't know, even a picture of a guy, but let's say like a guy, some crazy guy, your enemy. He's mad. He wants to kill you and he has a gun. You're like, okay, he has a gun. We all have guns, all good. But if the guy has a psychotic blade on the front of his gun and he's like sharpening it himself, you're like, bro, I'm not going near that guy, bro. He's like, that knife makes him seem crazy.
There is something very zen and beautiful about sharpening your knife too.
Yeah.
Like it's a soul cleansing task.
Yes, sir.
Sharpening your knives. And now I'm adding to that, sharpening your shovel.
God, good idea.
Next, the M1 rifle is the most deadly rifle in the world. If you cannot see the enemy, you can at least shoot at the place where he's apt to be. Same message there. He's got something in here. I might not have outlined it. But just, he basically, these things that he's saying, he knows that he's saying them for the psychological boost for his troops. He says here, the defense will consist of mutually supporting small groups arranged in depth and completely wired in. He didn't say overlapping fields of fire, but he should have. Mines will be placed. Talks about artillery, talks about armor, talks about recon, talks about anti-aircraft and anti-tanks. And look, all those things are brilliant, and I'm not breezing through them because I don't love artillery and I don't love armor. Anybody that knows anything about me knows that I love armor and artillery. But the sections in this are very, very tactical. He talks about maintenance. Weapons will be kept in perfect order. Preventative maintenance will be enforced. Particular attention should be given to tire pressure, lubrication, battery voltage, and water in radiators. Vehicles will be serviced and made operational before their crews rest. Vehicles will be marked in accordance with paragraph 6, TAC 14, AR 850, TAC 5. We did a long mission, like a whole cycle of darkness, my first deployment. And we got back to base and everyone was beat. And my leading petty officer was he was the lead nav. And the lead nav guy is the kind of guy that directs the convoy. And we got back to the gate in Baghdad, at our base at Baghdad. And he comes up on the radio and he's like, "Hey boss, can we just take the vehicles back and refuel, later?" And I let it sit right there like that. I didn't say anything. And then I finally go, "Negative, take it to the fuel depot." And he's like, "Roger."
He already knew the answer.
He already knew the answer.
Right when you jammed up the rhythm.
Right when I jammed up the rhythm, he already knew the answer. And he was like, "Roger." And I let everybody, because we're exhausted, man.
Yeah.
And it was freezing cold. It was raining. So it was raining, and this is before we had doors. We didn't have doors on our Humvees. So it's probably 35 or 40 degrees because there was a little bit of sleet happening. So it was right around the freezing mark, and we did probably a 4-hour drive to get to the target area. The target was outside. It took us a few hours to get this whole thing settled. We ended up having to move around a giant cache of weapons that we captured outside in the rain, blah, blah, blah. And then we get in the vehicles. And so you're in the vehicles. It's 35 to 40 degrees. It's raining. And you got a 50-mile-an-hour wind the entire time because the doors are open. So everyone's freezing. When we get back, the sun's coming up. So it's been an entire cycle of darkness. So I don't know how many hours, but something like there's no sleep. Yeah, and the LPO comes over the radio. And he's like, "Hey, boss, can we just take it back to camp and fuel up vehicles later?" And I'm like, "Negative. Let's take it to the fuel depot." He's
Wait,
like,
where was this? That it
"Roger."
was
Baghdad.
Dang, it gets that cold, huh?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep. Middle of the winter.
Yeah.
Cold, especially with that 60-mile-an-hour wind.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's the deal. You take care of that team gear.
Makes sense.
Because I guarantee you that one time you decide you're going to not fuel up the vehicles, that's the time you're going to get called out on a QRF. And we would get called out on QRFs pretty regularly. Yeah. Not all the time, but I mean, it was a decent percentage, not a high percentage, but there's a decent percentage that we get a call that said, "Hey, we need QRF out here. We need QRF over there." We'd be like, cool. You need quick reaction force, meaning troops are in trouble. Yeah. Hold on while we refuel our vehicles. No, we're never going to do that.
And that's not to mention the precedent, right? Where, and this goes for anything or whatever. I know it's very prevalent with kids where, they want to push up against the rule, not in some, hostile way or whatever, just sort of like, let me see. Yeah, like, I don't know, no dessert during the week or something like this. And then it's like a weeknight. Hey, can we have, come on. We've been having.
Not happening. Yeah. We're not doing it.
Yeah, you give them dessert that one day. It's kind of like, ooh, they know. Like, ooh, sure, that's the rule. But under certain emotional circumstances, maybe we can get away with that one.
The cool thing, hey, you know what? LPO's looking out for the boys. Yeah. Which is part of the job, right? There's a push-pull, right? There's always that push-pull. He's looking out for the boys. He knows they're tired. Hey, look, even if we got called for QRF, we're not super effective because we've been up for 20, 30 hours, right?
Yeah, huh?
So we're not super effective, and he's probably thinking about that too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a good point. He would technically have like a little argument.
Yeah, it's an argument.
It's like, hey, we're like less effective, and rest is important, as Patton said. So, hey, man. So yeah, it makes sense.
But
we
had to hold the line on that one.
Yeah, that makes sense. The QRF situation makes more sense.
Yeah, QRF situation is important. And
well, you'd rather the guys be a little bit more tired than the vehicles be on empty.
There was a good moment of silence on that one. The other good moment of silence, we got, this is again my first deployment to Iraq, and we got ambushed in a convoy, and pretty typical. I was in the number 2 vehicle. Pretty typical that the enemy wouldn't realize where we were because we would drive really fast, blacked out. They wouldn't realize until towards the end of the convoy. And so in this particular one, we got ambushed, and it was mostly centered on the back vehicles, right? But I was looking, as I'm looking at my field of fire, I can see all kinds of tracers going by. I can see, and then they fired a couple RPGs that went over our convoy and exploded on my side of the road because they ambushed us from the other side. So this big ambush happens, and the call comes out, which actually the call was made by the same guy that was asking the question earlier, is the LPO, who's lead nav, and he's push through, which is totally normal. So we did it, and then we just keep going, right? And I don't say anything, and then my platoon chief, again, both my LPO and platoon chief, awesome guys. We always had a good time, but he comes up on the radio, and you can hear in his voice he's a little bit spun up,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, hey, Jocko, you heard we got ambushed back here? And I'm just like, long moment of silence, and I said, Roger.
Yep.
And that was it. We did what we had to do, but those are funny moments of silence that happen from time to time. Because everyone's because in my platoons, in my task unit, talking on the radio was so limited.
Mm-hmm.
Basically no one talked on the radio, unless you had something really important to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so when there was something on the radio, everyone was 100% listening to it.
Yeah.
And when someone was asking me a question, everyone was 1,000% listening to what my response was going to be, especially when it's like, hey, we might get some more sleep, or hey, we just got ambushed, does Jocko know? It's like both those people are going, what are we going to do? Because there's a possibility. It's like, hey, all stop, we're going to turn around and go and hunt down these people that ambushed us, which is not a good idea. And we didn't do it. But everyone's thinking maybe I'm going to say that, or maybe I'm going to say whatever. But everyone's listening to what my response is going to be.
Yep.
Little moment of silence, dramatic effect, possibly.
Possibly.
Or I'm just here's what's actually happening. I'm sitting there considering the situation, Okay. Is everyone okay? They must be, or we'd be getting a casualty report. Or, hey, maybe we should go to sleep before we I'm thinking through the actual situation. I'm not just, trying to be a jerk.
Right. Trying to be cool.
I'm actually thinking, okay, I know we got ambushed. I'm waiting is there a casualty? I think, I might have said something like, are we up? Or no, if the push through call comes, everyone calls vehicles up. Up from there. 6 is up, 5 is up, 4 is up, 3 is up. So I already know everyone's good. We're already good.
There you go.
Check. All right. This last section is called Care of Men, which once again, you look at the leadership strategy and tactics manual, and some of the most important things that I try and make as clear as possible is that you gotta care about your men. You gotta care about your people. That's what you got to do. It's what Mukayama taught me. I mean, I wouldn't say Mukayama taught me that, but when he said it, I was like, that's the underpinning of everything, this thing that's been a tenet of my leadership principles. Let's call it a sort of a flying below the radar tenet, oh yeah, you got to take care of your people. Yeah, I totally get that. But when I heard General Mukayama talk about it, and we talked about Hackworth and I was like, oh yeah. It's not just under the radar. Yeah. It's the real thing.
Yeah.
So hence General Patton has got an entire section called Care of Men. Officers are responsible not only for the conduct of their men in battle, but also for their health and contentment when not fighting. An officer must be the last man to take shelter from fire and first to move forward. Similarly, he must be the last man to look after his own comfort at the